Within 15 minutes of starting The Last of Us, you care more about Joel than you probably have about any main character in a video game. And that's not an accident. Naughty Dog used a very precise series of techniques, what I'd call the economy of empathy, to make you feel things for characters you don't know, in situations you've never experienced, that you know aren't even real. And in doing that, they created one of the greatest intro sequences in the history of video games. Most people feel something when they play The Last of Us. Very few people realize why. You're about to be one of them. Since we're talking about the economy of empathy, we have to start from the beginning. Let me give you a quick recap of what happens in the opening cutscene. See if you can figure out what tricks the developers are using here to make you care. Joel comes home late and finds Sarah asleep on the couch, woken up by him talking to a client or a coworker. He tells her to scooch, and she does without complaint. She realizes it's still his birthday, and she gives him a watch because he's been complaining that his is broken. He puts it on, jokes that the new one is also broken, then asks where she got the money for it. That's 1 minute of dialogue, but it reveals years worth of family history and characterization, and it uses some psychological tactics to trick you into caring. Once you understand the tricks that the devs are using, you'll wonder how you didn't notice them before. Joel coming home this late and talking business at the door means he puts work before family. Maybe to support his family, but still. Sarah waking up without surprise tells you that this is a regular occurrence. Him telling her to scooch right after waking up might read as rude, but she doesn't question it, which tells you there's a strong bond between them, even if it's a little unconventional. In fact, the specific thing that's unconventional about this interaction will become really important in a minute. Sarah has been holding on to Joel's gift, which means he never told her what time he'd be home. She waited all day, and she saved her own money to buy the watch, which tells you family comes first for her, even when Joel makes that difficult. Then, Joel jokes that the new watch is broken like his old one, and when Sarah realizes he's kidding, she laughs it off. This is where the first minute of dialogue gets really interesting, because that laugh, as minor as it seems, is doing more work than almost anything else in the opening. Sarah is laughing because this is just how Joel is. She already knows that he shows up a little late, a little deflecting, and more comfortable with a joke than with tenderness. And she loves him anyway. She accepts his love language because of her connection to him. In a single laugh, Naughty Dog has given you the entire emotional history of this two-person family. A father who loves his daughter but doesn't quite know how to show it, and a daughter who loves her father enough to meet him where he is. And there's another really subtle trick going on here. As onlookers, you can tell that Joel is bad at emotions, that he wants to love his daughter outwardly but can't. We see Joel making this simple joke about a broken watch, and we can sense that from the outside, he's not all that close to his daughter. But we also know that he's misunderstood, because from context clues, we know nothing is more important to him. One of the only truly universal feelings for humans is the feeling of being misunderstood. Some of the greatest characterizations in the history of literature, movies, TV shows, and video games involve the main character feeling misunderstood. We instantly connect to these characters because we know what it feels like. And Naughty Dog knows this. They use it to their advantage. They show us a character who we ourselves could misunderstand, but they give us just enough evidence to know the truth. But what's really interesting is the subtext this dynamic reveals, because there's something even deeper you can pick up on if you're really paying attention. Throughout the entire game, Joel almost never mentions Sarah's mother. We get no explanation as to why she's gone, there are no photos of her in the house, she's entirely written out of the story, and out of Joel's life. When you think about this in combination with what you've learned about Joel and Sarah's relationship, it's not a huge logical jump to think her loss is just too much for Joel to handle, or at least to talk about. He's not good at emotions, so he buries anything that might make him feel them, even if that means never thinking about the wife he lost ever again. Joel isn't comfortable with vulnerability. It's why he never talks about Sarah's mother. It's why he jokes about Sarah's gift when a heartfelt reaction would have been much more appropriate. And so when Joel eventually shows his emotions around Ellie, it's all the more important for two reasons. First, it shows us that he's growing. He learned from his past mistakes. He's changing in front of us, and we naturally value and appreciate character growth. And second, it makes us realize that he's continuously aware that he'll never be able to show his real daughter how much he loved her. He can only try to be vulnerable with Ellie, who's really a stand-in for a relationship he can never quite fix. And then there's Joel's first question about the gift, which is interesting for a different reason entirely. He asks, "Where'd you get the money?" It's a knee-jerk reaction, one he doesn't have to hide. Money is always on his mind. He works long hours because he cares about Sarah, he just can't always show it in the way she might want him to. With just 1 minute of dialogue, you understand these two people completely. You can empathize with the single-parent Joel who's a little rough around the edges and maybe doesn't really know how to be emotional. And you can empathize with Sarah, who loves her father despite his obvious flaws. You understand all that, and the game hasn't even started yet. And when it does start, there's something even weirder going on. Another trick the developers played to get you to feel things in just a few minutes. When you finally take control of a character, that character isn't Joel. It's Sarah. You're in her bedroom, looking at her things, seeing the world through her eyes. For the first few minutes, you move her body. You feel her confusion and her growing unease as things start exploding and the neighbors start acting strangely. You experience the beginning of the apocalypse as a child who doesn't understand what's going on. This was a deliberate late production decision by Naughty Dog. In interviews, the developers said the goal was to frame the horror of the world through a child's perspective. It's something universal and something that everyone can relate to. If you had started as Joel, you wouldn't have the same sense of discomfort and instant loneliness. The developers have you play as Sarah to rush the tension. And psychologically, this choice works for another very specific reason. When you inhabit a character, you don't just observe them as you might in a movie. You begin to merge with them. Researchers call this self-other overlap. The boundary between your sense of self and your sense of another person starts to blur. The longer you live inside a perspective, the more real it becomes to you. So when control shifts to Joel and he scoops Sarah up and runs, something really cool happens. You're not watching a girl you met in a cutscene. You're watching a character you've already been forced to connect with. And when that soldier raises his gun, you know why the moment is so unnerving and scary and tense. You already know what it feels like to be her, because for the last few minutes, you were. And the devs really doubled down here in these moments when Joel carries Sarah through a burning city. But let me get back to that in a minute. Just remember the carrying scene. Before Joel leaves for work the next morning, he leaves Sarah a note. It says he'll be home late and that she should order food. One sentence, no apology, no explanation. Written in the shorthand of a routine that was established over years. This is just how it goes, and they both know that. The writers could have just thrown us into the gameplay as Joel going to help a neighbor who is acting strangely. In fact, that was the initial intro for the game. They could have started with a backstory about the infection, like the TV show did, but they didn't. Instead, they showed you a mundane interaction between a father and a daughter. They showed you a boring note on a fridge, and they let you play as Sarah first, just for a minute. And they trusted you to feel the weight of it all yourself. When the audience makes the emotional connection to characters on their own, it lands harder than anything you hand them directly. That's the economy of empathy. You don't need a backstory. You don't need exposition. You need specific moments that take 1 minute to give you 5 years worth of information. Now, remember how I said Joel carrying Sarah was important? Well, when you take the controls as Joel, you're carrying Sarah again. And the carrying by itself is just another psychological trick the devs are using. There's a principle in storytelling, sometimes referred to as the save the cat method, that says if you want people to care about a character, you show that character caring for someone or something else. The classic example is to have the character save a cat from a tree, hence the name. The idea is that as empathetic beings, we tend to connect with people most when they care for others. And not just connect most, but connect fastest. Showing Joel carrying his daughter is a heuristic. Your mind sees it, and even though Joel doesn't seem like the greatest father, you instantly care about him, because he cares for someone else. Joel doesn't tell Sarah he loves her, but he works late to provide for her and he carries her upstairs to bed. We see that he loves her in his actions, and that's way more powerful than any words he could speak. But there's something different about the way he carries her the second time in the intro. This time, he's running through chaos. Fires, explosions, and screaming, and she's in his arms again. It may not have been clear to everyone that Joel lives for Sarah in his reaction to her gift, in how he avoids touching moments, but when he carries her to bed and then carries her through the end of the world, it's undeniable. Naughty Dog gave you a character to be before they gave you a character to love. They showed you a father's flaws before they showed you his devotion. They trusted a single laugh, a broken watch, and a one-sentence note to carry more emotional weight than most games spend hours setting up. They showed you a father who has never been able to express his love for his daughter, and then they take the daughter away so he never will. Every detail in that opening adds to that weight, and the reason it still wrecks people who have played it 5 times over is that it doesn't ask you to feel something. It builds the conditions under which you can't help but feel for these characters you know aren't even real. And when Ellie comes in as a substitute for Sarah, Joel is given a second chance to be the father he wasn't able to be the first time around. And it's even more painful because we as players know that even if he succeeds, even if he changes, it won't really fix anything. That is the economy of empathy. And now you know why it makes you care so much. Thanks for watching.